Well, this is a typical cup-hole mortar. It's just basically a slab of basalt. People just get a pestle and start grinding wheat or barley, such as you see here. Start making a impression in the rock, and gradually that gets deeper and deeper through use, so that they're making the thing as they're using it. And eventually, as you see, they start another one when it gets too deep and unwieldy to use.
Stone Age archaeology requires sharp eyes to pick the difference between dusty rocks and ancient artefacts. Farmers needed an even larger kit of specialised tools, each carefully shaped in stone.
This is a small pick, and this is an axe, for example. And this is small adze. This is a large size axe. As you can see, they vary their shape and size. And this is on limestone, axe on limestone. These are flint.
The first farmers still relied on hunting. The country around Zad was arid, and game was becoming scarce. They needed to improve the odds of hunting to bring down faster game at a distance. So they invented the bow and arrow. Perhaps they used it in human conflict, but there's not enough evidence to tell. In the long human journey, we can now finally say these farming people had settled down. They had a village, mud and rock houses with a door and a hearth built for a single family. They lived in a small community. These are the remains of the first proper houses we find anywhere in the world.
Here we have what is probably going to be the entrance to this big teardrop-shaped house. The walls are more or less continuous all the way around, and yet here we have a clear break. So this may be where people came in. Now this hearth here is an arrangement of stones which, as you can see, have been mortared in place. Now we've dug through the upper phase, but when we found it, as it still partly exists in the upper floor, it was really mortared over all round. It's clearly been set on the lower floor and been used through successive build-up of floors. But they're large houses. This is six metres in its major axis, and it's beautifully made with limestone mortared into place with some kind of local lime mortar.
They treated these huts as homes. Each year they burnt the roofs to get rid of the bugs. The floors were levelled and remade. Like their Natufian forebears, they buried their dead under the floor. Then they opened the graves and removed the dried skulls. They brought their ancestors back into the world. The skull remained undisturbed in this position until it was excavated by the team at Zad. Most field archaeology happens in short bursts. Data is gathered in weeks and then analysed over months. The stones sometimes reveal something extraordinary. Inscribed drawings or pictographs. The scratched lines mark a quantity. This may be the first known record of a number. The biggest change created by farming is more children. A family could now feed lots of babies. After all, many hands make light work. For hunter-gatherers, it was just the opposite. They had to carry their small children on long treks. They had no more than they could manage. Now, farming families could support several generations to give the community a storehouse of wisdom. The trouble is, the farmers were on a treadmill.
Once they began growing their own food, there was no way of going back, because even if you are unsuccessful, you still have some surplus. And when you learn how to keep a surplus, because you need to sow the seeds next year. So basically, you cannot stop farming. You can erase some of farming lands when you have a series of droughts and people will migrate to another place. But what is inherent in an agricultural society is the number of kids, that with this kind of food, you have an increasing number of kids.
Inevitably, populations grew. More people, more farming, more food, more people. Humans were living on a larger scale than ever before. It was a huge challenge. People had to be organized. Now they needed leaders.
Once you have one biological viable entity living in one village, say 300-400 people living in the village, which means about, say, 100 families, and they don't move, there is naturally someone is going to become a chief, right? So you have the beginning of the emergence of social institutions, having the elders and maybe having a chief, maybe a shaman and so on.
At Jef al-Ahmar in Syria, archaeologists uncovered a much larger settlement. In the middle of the ruins, they found a building too large to be a house. Instead, it was used to store large amounts of grain.
It's a very big building, circular, and when we began to dig this building, we had to go 2 meters down because the walls under earth were 2 meters high. And this building could be used for storage, and the storing is enormous. It cannot be the storing for one people, it's a communal storing. Then you have a bench where people can sit and meet, and probably you had also ceremonies in this kind of house.
Families were giving part of their own harvest to a single group granary. Humans had taken a breathtaking step. Our families and clans were united into large organized communities. We were now living in societies with leaders. Far away to the north, another continent remained virtually unknown and unchanged by its human inhabitants. Across the vast expanse of Europe 9,000 years ago, a great forest stretched from the Black Sea to the coast of Brittany. Here, people still lived as they always had, hunting and gathering wild food, moving from place to place. Eventually, the revolution that began in the Fertile Crescent would spread across the rest of the world. Nearly all our ancestors would take up farming. But for most, it would not happen for many thousands of years.